Prof, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. We've heard this over and over again from the government, but also from mining companies themselves, that we have an abundance of coal. It would be folly for us if we were to stop using it.
Yeah, but we can have an abundance of coal, but it costs a lot of money to turn it into energy. It costs about R1.30 per kilowatt hour, whereas renewables are 60 cents per kilowatt hour, and nuclear is R1.70, between R1.70 and R2.80. If you add carbon capture and storage onto that, it's going to go up to about R1.60. So the abundance of coal is completely irrelevant. What matters is how much it costs to turn it into energy.
So how did the conversations go at that particular gathering? Were these arguments advanced perhaps more vigorously than has been the case before? The argument you've just made, that is.
Yeah, I mean, everybody at the conference came to the conclusion that the speech by the minister was the best speech he's ever given with respect to renewables, very conciliatory. He started off his speech by saying that what matters is making sure that the cheapest energy is produced for the sake of saving the South African economy. He ended off his speech by referring to a complementary mix of technologies. So we have coal at the moment, we have nuclear, and we're going to add a lot more renewables because they are the cheapest. And he said that they are the cheapest.
Well, I remember going to an ESCOM briefing where some of the officials there were telling us that to get renewables into the system is a bit of a challenge currently.
What's the challenge? I mean, we have a lot of renewables. We have the fastest growing renewables sector in the world. About over 200 billion has been spent, about 5% of GDP. And there is a clamoring from all over the world, as well as from our own South African financial institutions, to invest more in renewables. I'm not sure what the problem is.
No, I do remember, in fact, we had someone who is an activist in the area of renewables saying they do actually have the capacity, but they are being blocked. So the question then becomes, if a Gwede Mantashe is able to make what you say is the best speech that he has ever made, then why then aren't they facilitating the entry of like a more vigorous entry of renewables into the system?
Well, the most significant thing he said today was that the integrated resource plan will be approved by Cabinet next week. And if the integrated resource plan is approved, that is going to open the floodgates, because what follows then after is what is called the fifth window, when government calls for proposals for an additional quantity of renewable energy that goes onto the grid. And renewable energy power plants can get built in a year. They all come in on budget. There's no corruption. And so we're going to be able to produce a lot more renewable energy very quickly. If we want to build a coal-fired power plant, it's going to take many, many, many years, and we probably will not find anybody in the world who will provide the funding, because all the biggest financial institutions in the world are withdrawing from coal.
You know, the mills of government tend to grind very, very slowly. Are you saying that after approval next week, there is no possibility of anybody in the system trying to drag their feet or even changing the course that will have been agreed to or approved?
I don't think we can say that. When we live in a democracy, and there may well be aggrieved parties who might take these decisions on judicial review, which could delay things. Hopefully, the integrated resource plan is going to make a sufficient number of people happy enough not to oppose it, and then that creates opens the way for what is called the fifth bid window, which is when all the renewable energy players put forward their best bids for building wind farms and solar plants around the country. And there will be many more other bid windows that need to take place, because we have to replace our aging coal-fired power fleet, which has to be decommissioned over the next 20 years. We have to replace that with renewables.
But who could possibly put a spanner in the works?
Well, it could be coal interests that believe that there's too much renewables. It could be renewable interests that believes there's too much coal. It could be trade unions who are worried about jobs getting lost. There may even be challenges from certain developers. We don't know.
What about a vested interest? Because we know that, I mean, a lot of politically connected people are in the coal space. And I mean, listening to the ANC over the past couple of weeks, one didn't get a sense that things have moved significantly forward.
Well, then I'm not sure which ANC you're listening to. The president sent a very clear statement to the United Nations Climate Summit, where he made it very, very clear that South Africa is committed to a just transition and a transition to renewable energy. Naledi Pandor and Barbara Creecy, both ministers in attendance at the UN summit, repeated those arguments. And in the ANC NEC statement, which came out last week, it says the ANC itself is committed to the lowest cost option, which is another way of saying it supports renewables, and a just transition. So yes, there are certain elements who still believe that somehow it's going to be possible to continue to build coal-fired power stations, but they are going to have to demonstrate where the funding is going to come from.
But I mean, we've heard that before from the ANC. They've said they've made similar statements before, and if you look at that statement they issued afterwards, yes, it did say exactly what you just said, but very little more than that.
Well, I don't think they've ever made it so clear that they support the lowest cost option, and such an explicit commitment to now formulating the just transition. But you have to see that in a much wider context. The Climate Crisis Summit in New York, the President's statement, the statements by other ministers, even Gwede Mantashe is saying we mustn't look at renewables as the enemy. And in today's speech, he made it clear that what really matters is price. And if whichever technology can prove that it is the most affordable, bring in the lowest cost energy, that's what government is going to support. I don't think we've seen this accumulation of statements about progress in quite a long time, in quite a number of years, actually.
You know, Prof, a short while ago, I was in conversation with a couple of actors and an entertainment lawyer. And they were talking about problems plaguing the film industry in particular. And one of the interesting things is that there is a piece of legislation that is currently sitting with the president. Public hearings were held in Parliament, conversations were had, everybody went there and had their input, but it's been sitting there with the president for months now. And apparently part of the problem is that there were people, powerful forces in society that were able to then make further representations, have private little conversations on the sides, still trying to influence things, and that is why this piece of legislation still hasn't been signed by the president. And I'm asking to say, even though so many things have been said in all these, at all these important platforms, it may not stop powerful forces within society to actually still get their way.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly entitled to take a pessimistic view, given the track record of decision-making on matters like that. But if the entertainment industry collapsed, the country's economy is not going to collapse. If Eskom collapses, if our energy system collapses, the whole economy collapses. So we are staring over the precipice at the moment, and even vested interests if they activate their lobbies, are going to have to justify why decisions must not be taken to support the cheapest possible energy available.
Prof, thank you so much for your time and insights this evening. Professor Mark Swilling, who is, of course, an academic who has written quite extensively on this subject of energy.